What's going on, guys? My name is Tommy. Welcome back to the channel. It's time for another episode of the Ancestry Anthology. Today, by request, the Strix race that I played in 1E, a race that I really like a lot, a race that I imagine I'm going to have a lot to say about here in 2E. I'd much rather just be flipping through my actual physical copy of the Lost Omens Ancestry guide that this is from, because it just came in the mail from Paizo today, alongside with, oh gosh, what was in that box? Alien Archive 4, the Starfinder cards that have like the kitsune and stuff in them, the first Abomination Vault. All of my like birthday presents and things are starting to roll into. So best timing ever. Thank you, Paizo. I'll talk about those later. For now, remember, if you're liking what you're seeing, to like, subscribe, ding the why do I crack my knuckles before I record these. Stay caught up with all of your Pathfinder stuff. Remember that Patreon is the #1 way to help me keep doing all this cool stuff. And spoiler alert for what I'm about to talk about in this video, because I imagine it's both a bit of a rant and like a video unto itself. If you play a Strix at my table, it has a fly speed from jump because they're born with wings. For now, my friends, let's hit it. Okay. Really quickly, one thing I want to say before we get down to the meat and potatoes here, just want to shout out the man, the math nerd, the legend, oh Mahogany, right before Fall of Plaguestone for letting me know this tidbit as I was complaining about this video that I just recorded. It turns out, within the Ancestry Guide's special rules section, which seemingly is found nowhere else on the Archives of Nethys, but if you go to Rules, Ancestry Guide, Flying PCs, indeed both the Strix and the Sprites who have wings begin with them at GM discretion can begin play with a 15-foot fly speed, replacing any other abilities that involve flying, and letting other Ancestry feats upgrade the fly speed. Really quickly, if you or someone you love works for the Archives of Nethys, it would be very helpful if you added this somewhere in the Ancestry entry for either the Strix or the Sprites, because since I had not cracked open my physical copy of Lost Omens Ancestry Guide yet and do not have a PDF, I pulled all of my information off the SRD, as so many of us do, and therefore recorded almost all of this video under the assumption that there was just no way in hell to give a Strix a fly speed without working for it and just hoping to God you got to that point in the game. There is also that very helpful tidbit, being aware that a flying PC can trivialize low and mid-level challenges, outshine or leave other characters behind. I don't think that's necessarily true, and as I say later in this video, we are indeed going to make a min-maxing for fun and profit about balancing flying PCs, which I don't think takes a lot of effort if I'm honest. But to make you all aware, that is a thing that exists, and I'm very happy to have found it at the 11th hour, so I didn't put out an incorrect video. Anyway, here we go. I had to go back and check my channel to see if we'd done this, because I forgot. We have indeed talked about the Strix. You can follow this card right up here if you missed that for first edition. I even used 2E art for that video. Anywho, the Strix, or in their own language, ergo the name I will be using for them, because I think that's a much better world-building exercise, to call the race what they're called rather than the Latin bird of ill omen that presumably Chelish colonizers called them as they were killing them. The Itarii are, again, avian-esque humanoids with talons and wings sprouting from their backs. They average about 6 feet tall or so. Taller than a human, but as you would imagine for a race that can fly, considerably lighter for their size. They're considered mature around 14 years old. They live to be about 40 years. They have pointed ears and large eyes that are usually black from sclera to pupil, but sometimes come out as gold, which I imagine is very terrifying if you play like a Strix rogue who's sneaking up on you. Shiny eyes, oops, you're dead. They lack the ability to move their eyes independently of their head, which means they have to turn their head to see things, as again you might imagine for an avian-flavored humanoid. They are a rare and reclusive people who cling to their ancestral territories, the largest of which resides on the Devil's Perch, but they have traveled, as you imagine most species would, all across the width and breadth of Golarion. They've had a long history of conflict, again, with their nearby neighbors and friends in Cheliax, and this has bred into them, as war often does, a deep fear and suspicion of humans. They've struggled to keep hold of their territories and maintain their numbers in the face of constant conflict with enemies who want to destroy them and vastly outnumber them. And given the tribal structure of the Strix, losing one hurts really bad. Anyway, once again, this is a rare ancestry. You probably won't see them a whole heck of a lot in the scope of your adventures. They are medium creatures with 8 hit points from their ancestry. They've got a speed of 25 feet, a boost to their dexterity with 1 freebie, and no drawback. They have low light vision. Strange that they don't have dark vision, given that they are in fact nocturnal, but I imagine that's a heritage we're about to see. They speak Common, Strix, and additional languages according to their int, and of course have wings. While not all Strix focus on honing their flying skills, a strong flap of their wings allows Strix to travel longer distances while jumping. They can move an additional 5 feet while leaping horizontally. They don't auto-fail high jump or long jump checks if they don't move 10 feet first. And they can jump a little higher with their long jump, but don't automatically possess a fly speed. This is strange for me when you realize that Strix settlements are built at the highest points of local landscapes, particularly mountains that make foot traffic impossible. Not to mention they're born with them, it's a huge part of their description. Like, look at this man's, he can't fly. More on that in a sec. Heritage stuff, here we go. The Night Glider Strix, the dedicated nocturnal avian, gets dark vision, and there it is, you knew you'd see it. The Predator Strix gains a Talon melee unarmed attack that deals 1d4 slashing. That's very important as well, because since it's a Talon and not a claw attack, it's on your feet, meaning a Strix could, for example, like I did with an Iruxi once, ever stand stance with a shield, and then claw somebody with their feet, or claw down when they're flying overhead. I'm a little mad about it, aren't I? Scavenger Strix gets trained in survival, free forager skill feat, and a +1 circumstance bonus to survival checks to subsist. The Shoreline Strix is trained in athletics and gets free underwater marauder. And the Songbird Strix gets a +1 circumstance on deception checks to impersonate, a mimicked voice where the sound of the voice is the only factor. Masters get 2, you get a +1 circumstance on performance to sing, or again 2 if it's master. Feats, in our case that have talents, but whatever. Nestling Fall at level 1, as long as you can act, you take no fall damage no matter what, because you can glide with your wings you can't fly with. So if you were flying some other way at level 1, you don't take damage. Or I guess like if you get pushed off a rooftop. Story Crooner gets you trained in performance, or a freebie if you already had it. You gain impressive performance for free and a +1 circumstance bonus whilst performing for an audience of Strix, as this is how, in fact, they have carried down their oral tradition. Strix Defender, a restricted feat in society play. Odd, because it's probably very good. You get a +1 circumstance bonus to intimidate, perception, and survival, but only against humans, as well as your damage rolls against humans with weapons and unarmed attacks. This also gives you a -2 circumstance penalty to diplomacy checks against them. They usually start with 1 step of attitude worse. That said, that's really good. A very wide swath of people you'll fight in Pathfinder will in fact be humans, so this almost always gets you value. Strix Lore gets you trained in acrobatics and nature, or another thing. And Strix Lore indeed, as you assumed you'd see. Weird that you don't see a weapon proficiency slot for these guys. That was an important part of them in 1st edition. I'm very surprised we don't see like Strix weapon heritage that gives you trained in nets, bolas, longbows, and spears, or something like that. But I suppose it is what it is. Moving on, level 5, if you actually wanted to play Goliath today, Feathered Cloak allows you to fold your wings on your back, creating the illusion indeed of cloak. This gives you a +2 circumstance bonus to deception to impersonate a version of yourself whom is not a Strix. You also get a +2 circumstance to stealth to hide things in your cloak wings. That's also got to be a hell of a stretch too, right? My back hurts just thinking about it. Fledgling Flight at level 5 for 1 action once per round. You can fly through the air in short bursts at half your land speed. If you don't end your movement on solid ground, you fall. So half your movement speed rounded down means for 1 action at level 5, you may fly 10 feet. If you don't land on solid ground, you'll fall. You theoretically won't take damage for doing this, but like, what does this do? Why do you want this? Why do we take this? This ostensibly lets you get a very much easier jump shot, or like reaching someone flying above you, reaching something flying off a cliff. It seems like a very unnecessary gate. Anyway, Strix Vengeance, once per 10 minutes, a free action with the trigger. You or Strix ally you can see are damaged by an enemy's crit. Until the end of your next turn, you deal an additional +1d6 damage on strikes against the triggering enemy. It goes up to 2d6 if you're using a striking weapon. A major striking gives you +3d6 for extra damage, essentially once per encounter if you get crit first or someone happened to play a Strix. Though really, like, Who wants to play a Strix if you don't have the fly speed? This looks so much worse than a lot of other things mechanically. So I imagine it will be very few and far between that you see a lot of Strix in the same party. And like also if you're gonna bake in a feat that incentivizes, even if it's just you, that incentivizes you, the player, being critically hit by the bad guy, even if you can fly, this incentivizes you to stay in their face so they can crit you, so you can glass cannon out. Anywho, Throw Voice lets you cast Ventriloquism as a primal innate once per day, or twice per day if you were a Songbird Strix, which is kinda cool. Big ambush energy and all that. Ferocious Gust. For 2 actions, once per 10 minutes, you beat your wings, whip up a furious gust directed at your opponents for a gust of wind once per combat, or essentially as often as you have focus points. Pretty good defensive tech. Juvenile Flight at level 9 once per day for 2 actions. You can keep your wings unfolded for 10 minutes, giving you a fly speed equal to your land speed. If you took Fledgling Flight, you probably did. You get a plus 10-foot status bonus to your speed. And like, that's fine and all to have it once for 10 minutes or 1 combat essentially, but like real talk, not every game goes to level 9. In fact, many games do not. I've been GMing professionally for 3 years and have about that much experience on the back end. Iron Fang Invasion right now is in book 6 and will probably be finishing that campaign in the next 4 or 5 sessions-ish, depending on how fast they crawl through the dungeon. I finished a couple other games when I was first starting, and I had, frankly, time so I could show up at my friend's house at noon and leave that house at 9 p.m. after 9 hours of D&D. To be young again. Other than that, most games wrap after 2 or 3 books in an adventure path. Sometimes you just get bored, sometimes you want to do other things. Sometimes your character is killed at level 2. We could have put something cooler in the Ancestry feat slot if we could just fly normally. Husa, Rakoan Arts, lets you cast Speak with Animals and Status as primal innates once a day. Wing Step lets you step twice for 1 action, very elf steppy of you. Ancestor's Transformation turns you via a 5th level aerial form into a primeval Strix using the statistics for a bird. Too bad we don't have art for that. I really want to see what that looks like. This I like. Fully Flighted at 13 lets you just fly forever, 4 levels sooner than like the Azamar and Tiefling's fly speed. But again, not every game is going to make it that far. And we could have put so many other cool things in the Ancestry feat spots, or like moved some of these, like, here's a thing you can do, cast Speak with Animals once a day. Put that in the level 5 slot, not the level 9 slot where it feels very like, why would I take this? At this point, either the druid is already doing that, or like we never needed it in the first place, so it feels really forced. And again, like, fly speeds aren't that overpowered. They're good, don't get me wrong, but not so good as to put this much of a gate behind them. Especially in a universe where we're putting out a tiny Ancestry as well. And like within the bounds of the sprites entry, we'll talk about it later, there's a lot of like how to balance the tiny creature. We could do the same thing with flying creatures. And I'll talk about that in a week. We're gonna make a video about it. Maybe a min-maxing for fun and profit session 0 is in order. Yeah, God, there's gotta be. But let's focus on the good. Strix Vengeance is, in a vacuum, pretty powerful. Being able to do something once per 10 minutes is essentially like a focus power without focus point. Granted, you have to get domed first, but it's pretty easy to get domed in 2nd edition. Especially if like you see the big number and you don't raise your shield because you want to get hit and get mad about it. And then like Nova off immediately after, you know what I mean? Run to the healer afterwards, or have your own healing on deck because you know you've built to hurt yourself, and then get d6s that continue to multiply up as you then crit in return. Extra damage against humans also means this number goes up higher, which is cool. The Ancestry looks pretty strong, just also feels so missed opportunity to me. Would I play one of these? Yeah, by all means. I have recently in Rapunithuk. I played the Tanks You're Welcome build that we made. Follow this card right up here, I suppose, if you don't know what that is. I ended up dying because I stayed in javelin range too much, but it was a lot of fun to be able to fly around and control the battlefield land where I needed to do stuff and then have a very good get out of jail card if things got scary, in the form of just, I'm gonna fly straight up. Also, I've had a hankering, especially throughout 2020, for some Hell's Rebels. and I 10 out of 10 would play an Itarii in Rebs, because nothing feels better than burning down the established powers that have burned down your people, right? Also, just the Ancestry seems very, very cool to me. I like them on flavor. I like how well developed they are. Just fix that one thing, which again, like I said, at my table, it has a fly speed equal to your base movement speed. Dunzo. Expect the skies to darken with some archers and adventure paths so I can keep you in check. But that's all the time I have. What do y'all think? Have we rolled him up? Are we playing him in 2E? How do we feel about the fly speed reduction? Is it a fair balance or is it a nerf too far? Let me know in the comments. As always, thank you guys so much. I'll go ahead and say it here. This will rapidly become out of date, but there will not be an episode of Min-Maxing for Fun and Profit this week because I don't feel like editing on my birthday. Gonna go out and play around in this really nice Midwestern weather probably. But till then, folks, we'll see you next time.